Thanks everyone for taking your lunch break to come sit in this presentation. So my name is Adrian Long. I'm the practice manager for data science and artificial intelligence for Datacom. So before we get started, I just want to understand the audience. How many of you are finance analysts here? FP&A?
Sort of finance analysts.
Financial accountants, anyone? Half and half. Any senior leaders or leaders in the room? Any executives, leaders, couple leaders? Okay, good. Any data scientists?
In the future or not?
No one. All right, great. Yeah. So the real topic today is really how do you bridge the talent gap, right? A bit about myself. I'm actually a CPA member as well. Crossed over into analytics sometime about 10 years ago. Really to help senior execs make better decisions. I was sitting in the FP&A team. So really trying to help the business be very objective about what decisions they want to make. So consider this. How many of us would have expected that companies like Uber and Netflix could actually rule the market? None of us would have seen that coming. So in today's environment, there's an increasing shift towards data-driven decisions. And this is actually happening across the whole board of industry. But at the same time, you probably read about data science, the sexiest job of the 21st century. I'm sure as senior leaders, you have difficulty finding the right type of talent. So I really believe that citizen data science holds the key to solving this challenge. And this will become critical to the real growth and survival of both large and small companies, and governments as well. So my name is Adrian Long, and I've been an Alteryx user since 2014. So I'm currently the practice manager of data science and AI for Datacom. Prior to that, I've had a long career in analytics and in finance in particular, covering telecommunications, insurance, banking, and consulting. So I've really had the fortunate luxury of helping companies grow and transform their analytic teams. So you guys are probably wondering why do I have this picture up here? I went to Disneyland 2 years ago, and it was really interesting because what I didn't realize was Disneyland, the headquarters of Alteryx is very near Disneyland. So if you do go to Disneyland, do check out the head office as well. It's quite an interesting learning experience. And it was really interesting because I was casually talking with the founders and they were saying, oh, you're going to Disneyland, come see us. I was like, are you joking? They're like, no, we're literally 20 minutes away. So it definitely helped me grow and shift my perspective on not just vendors, but how to actually look at companies as a whole. So you probably heard of tools like Alteryx, Tableau in the room. And I really believe that all of us sitting here as financial specialists, we have that opportunity to help our companies, whether in government, whether it's private or not-for-profits, to really help them make better decisions. So today's topic will be covering three major areas. The first of which is, what's a data scientist? The second of which is, how do you actually bridge this talent gap? And finally, how do you operate analytics as a team sport rather than as individual PhD statisticians? I think these three are the real key areas that I see in many different companies today. I'd like to keep the session quite interactive, guys, so please feel free to jump in with questions or ask away. So how many of you know what a data scientist is? Anyone?
I think they know, but they're shy.
Does anyone want to have a go at what they think as data scientist is?
Yeah, have a go. I think it is about looking at the data, analyzing it, and draw out insights where you can use to help business or help to solve a problem.
Okay, cool. Yep, that's pretty much what a data scientist does. So it's very hard to find data scientists because you need deep expertise in 4 major areas. The first of which is statistics, right? You got to have a deep quant background, but more importantly, you have to have domain knowledge in the area that you operate. A lot of people hire data scientists because they're PhDs, not because they can actually have domain expertise in that area. And I can't emphasize enough, it's really important to have that. The third of which is really about programming. So my expectation is that data science can program in R, Python, Scala, as well as SQL. So they should be language agnostic. They might have a preference, but they should be able to program multiple language. And finally, and most importantly, they must be able to dumb it down and communicate to stakeholders. Often I see PhD statisticians talk about R square, F1 score, lift ROC curves. But the senior exec go, what are you talking about? Like, I don't understand that. So that you got to really break down some of that stuff into language that senior people can understand. And I think as all of us accountants in the room, we often interact with senior leaders, so we can break it down from a P&L perspective, which is really, really helpful. So anyone guess what a citizen data scientist is? Have you heard of this term? Anyone? No new term? Okay, so a citizen data scientist is someone who actually creates or generates models that may be predictive or optimization in nature, so pretty advanced analytic models that they create, but whose primary function actually sits outside of that of analytics or even stats. So I think of the finance team, the FP&A team, as a potential candidate for citizen data science, right? I think of us in financial reporting as a potential candidate for citizen data science. And you might ask, why do this, right? I think because we sit in a very privileged position where a citizen data scientist is someone who actually sits in between the business analyst and the PhD statistician. They're able to bridge the gap with tools. And this is where tools like Alteryx, Tableau, all of them come in, where with a little bit of training, it's a very gentle learning curve, you can actually deliver a lot of financial performance and insight into your business for customers as well as for your leaders. So the next question that I always get is, why don't I just hire the PhDs and get it done, right? According to Microsoft, data science is really broken down into 5 key steps. The first of which is understanding the business. The second of which is grabbing data from multiple systems, ingestion, and business understanding. The third of which is actually doing the modeling. And then you deploy that model into a production scenario before you get business sign-off. So you can see the data science pipeline is actually broken up into 5 stages, but these 5 stages are not equally weighted. The first 2 stages actually take 80% of time. So if you have a $100,000 analyst, think of it, you're spending $80,000 on the first 2 steps. That's quite a typical pipeline. A lot of people think it's data science, AI, modeling, hardcore, 100% of that, but the reality is very different. So the second thing is, so you go to your boss and say, you know what, I'm going to hire 10 rockstar PhD statisticians, 200 grand each, we'll get it done. And then your boss says, very funny, like, how many of you seen the show Jerry Maguire, Show Me the Money? Right? You can't have a business case stack up in front of your senior leaders if you just hire PhD quants. So the second part of today's presentation is really how do you actually use and bridge this talent gap with tools like Alteryx. If you think about Alteryx, and this took me a while to realize as well, the platform itself it's really based on a continuum of simple to complex analytics. So what does that actually mean? It means that you start your journey with simple things like, I want to automate my business process. I want to automate my month end. Sounds quite normal, isn't it? Like you want to automate a process in the business. So typically when you start doing that, you see a lot of time savings as the financial benefit to your organization. But that's only the tip of the iceberg, right? As you progress in your journey, you would start using visualization platforms. Just a show of hands, how many of you guys use Tableau or Alteryx in the room? Tableau or Power BI? Any Tableau people? Power BI people? Okay. The good news is this platform works with both. So it's actually quite agnostic to the visualization engine that you select. As you evolve your analytics journey, the financial value actually moves up quite significantly as well. So often, you get called in to do self-service analytics or build a single customer view. I know a lot of companies talk about single customer view, but the reality is very few do it properly at a cost that's manageable. If you were to go build out a true single customer view, nothing short of $10-20 million, right? And the fact that you could use a $7,000 product to get you 95% of the way there with 2 resources, that's incredible, right? The financial return is huge. Another interesting use case that I'd like to touch on, and it's probably a bit new for accountants, is spatial analytics. And I see this happen a lot. They go, oh, I'm just the FP&A guy, why am I using spatial analytics? Well, think of the scenario that you work and you're trying to optimize your distribution footprint. Or perhaps you're trying to understand where your customers are in order to relocate your branches, or where you want to spend your marketing dollars, or where you want to invest your return from a government perspective. So I would definitely say that spatial is another interesting and quite easy to do in the tool because it's all drag and drop anyway. More traditional use cases include channel analytics. So how many of you guys do things like cost to serve a customer? Anyone does acquisition cost versus retention cost of customers? That would be an interesting area to look at. And finally, when you start moving up the curve, you can see we use things like Alteryx to do predictive customer churn, who's coming and going, next best conversations, as well as profiling, segmentation, pricing. So it really evolves, and it's the same platform, it's the same tools, the same people, right? I just want to keep reiterating that because a lot of people come to me and say, look, my current team doesn't know data science, why I got to bring a lot of people, got to hire a lot of people. But the reality is, in my journey, definitely you should pair a consultant up with internal staff so that there's knowledge transfer across. Right? That I cannot emphasize more. Really make sure that the people on board are paired up so that knowledge transfer goes across. So I guess I would like to quickly talk through the 4 different personas: customer service staff, the finance analyst, the sales analyst, and the data scientist. So just a show of hands, how many of you deal with contact centers or have customer service staff reporting into your business function? Anyone here? 1? Okay. What about finance analysts? Any finance, and half the room's finance analysts, isn't it? So budgeting, forecasting guys? Is that what you do every day? Load the cube, reforecast, Q1, Q2, Q3, rolling forecast. Yeah, the sales, anyone does deal with sales forecasting here in the room? No? And what about data scientists? Anyone have data science in their teams? No? Okay, cool, no worries. So in the first example, I just want to walk through with you, think about this, right? A customer service staff, typically in different organizations, whether in government or in corporate, they have to deal with a lot of stuff, right? They have to deal with multiple systems, multiple screens, multiple reports. And on top of that, they get measured for all their SLAs. So it's really a tough gig. Think about the scenario where one night, customer service staff wants to combine metrics from one report to another report, just so that she doesn't have to look at multiple screens and doesn't know how to do it. By just downloading the product and actually going to look at the website Alteryx for Excel. I think most accountants in the room know how to do a VLOOKUP here. Yes? Pretty much with basic skills like that, you can actually build analytics report, whether in Excel or a different system. You can actually combine data from your source system with Excel and actually build a single version that you can use. So the second persona is that of the finance analyst, and I think most of you, like me, would be doing this every month end. You would extract journal entries or financial numbers from your Oracle or SAP ledger, or maybe Dynamics or one of those 3. You would combine it with data from your source system, including your CRM or Salesforce system. And you have to do lots of VLOOKUP summaries and indexes in order to work out your run rate or where you land for your full year or half year performance. So how many of you in the room do this every month? Okay, half. So what does the other half do?
Seminars.
Go to seminars, that's it. Attend Hendrik's seminars here. Now, I'm just curious, so are the rest of you more in the financial accounting space where you have to process a lot of journal entries? Would that be a good proxy? So like I say, these tools can actually automate some of that process for you as well. So with a little bit of training, do a simple course on Alteryx, you can actually automate this process. But on top of that, you can actually do advanced forecasting like ETS, ARIMA, and actually focus your efforts on writing management commentary, interfacing with business leaders, and really thinking on their behalf, creating actions for what you want them to actually execute on. I highly recommend this course as well for accountants. It's called Udacity Predictive Analytics for Business. And what this course will do is teach you how to actually do data science over a three-month period. It also comes with licenses for Alteryx and Tableau. So if anything, just pay your $50 or $60 US and you get a full enterprise product suite for you to test out and learn how to use the tool. So the third persona is really that of the sales analyst. So sales analysts are often in a line of business where in pricing they are tasked to grow the business. So often I see them manually extract data from Salesforce, combine it with ledger systems or third-party systems or CSV extracts, and then do commentary on it. Because ultimately the sales leader goes, I just want to understand how to grow my business. How do I go about doing it? And the poor analyst has to go do all this data munging. So with tools like Alteryx, once again, you can actually combine not just your internal data, but you can actually look at your competitor websites and scrape your competitors' information for pricing. On top of that, you can actually overlay it with things like ABS stats, right? So that you can actually work out your market share in each statistical area, 1, 2, or 3, or even your postcode. And this is really an important element I see, because a lot of us accountants, they go, oh, my run rate is X, Y, Z, but they don't realize you've actually hit saturation in that particular zone. So trying to forecast, you're just poking and putting an assumption in rather than really understanding the demographics and how it flows through the P&L.
Yeah, Adrian, I have a question.
Sure.
So with the pricing information, is that connected automatically into the system or is manually?
Yeah, so this tool can be used to scrape your competitor's website. That's one part, but you can also interface with other production systems. It could be interfacing with external systems as well. So I think that's really the power of this tool. It's gentle learning curve, and an accountant can figure it out with a little bit of training. And I was actually involved in some quite sensitive analysis for looking at trade areas for financial organizations, where they want to rationalize branches, where do they want to invest and grow. So think about the use case for government. I know some of you work in Service New South Wales, so where do you open the next store? What type of customer transactions do you guys do in there? Do I don't know, go in there once a year to get my license renewed, or do I go there to do other things like get a boat license or how many fishing licenses, and really understand the customer so that for each demographic zone you can be very tailored. So given that there are no PhD statisticians in the room, I'll quickly whiz past that. For leaders in the room, definitely you would think of hiring your PhD statistician. I think there was a stat from Alteryx that quoted nearly 70 to 80% of models don't get deployed in production. So I would argue that it's actually quite a waste, right? It's very wasteful to hire a $200,000 resource and not get value out of it. The benefit of the tool is to actually take our Python code that the PhD statistician develops and actually wrap it into a platform that everyone in the business can use. So think of your PhD quant as developing the model and then handing it over to a citizen data scientist, which could be any of you in the room, right? It could be you, it could be sales, it could be anyone. And so they wrapped it in a nice, beautiful user interface for all of us to actually consume. So that way you can get benefit on your investment in the PhD statistician. And the reverse is true as well. By actually mentoring people, the PhD statistician learns how to speak English and not F1 scores and ROC curves and all that sort of SVM, hyperparameter optimization, mumbo jumbo. Right? So I think it actually works both ways. So the third part of the presentation is really around how do you build teams with analytics, right? The first of which is really, I would say, get together with business stakeholders and set a goal. I'm not talking about a data science goal, I'm talking about a business goal. It could well be something like, I want to be best in class for customer experience. A lot of people talk about this, but they don't actually know what it means, right? When you want to be best in class for customer experience, it means I collect data on every single touch point, whether digital, through the app, whether through the front-end website, or the minute you walk into the branch, where I can apply facial recognition to work out who you are. So I'm talking about combining data from holistic perspective so that at any one time I can segment the base and know exactly what people are doing. The second common use case is operational excellence. All governments now are under, corporates are under pressure to take costs out and reduce costs, right? So anything that you can do to help with that would be normally a great business use case. And finally, self-service analytics. You don't always go to a central team to ask for simple things. You want to reserve your central thin core to do really high-end analytics. Any questions, guys? Any comments?
Are you going to go through some example on how we execute the operational excellence using the system, or?
Yeah, I can do some of that. Any other questions? No?
Can you explain? I heard that Ultrix is quite typical, but if you feed in Tableau, you can use Tableau Prep, which is great, and it's much easier to use to learn.
Yeah, so I've actually used both products. But the organizations I work for are typically very complex, right? So I've used Tableau Prep. Tableau Prep is good for 2 to 3 data sources. If I give you 30 data sources, it will break. Yeah, so the organizations I work for, like Commonwealth Bank and all that, like at a minimum, we start with 10 data sources. And that's just BAU, right? Before I start ramping to 15, 20. Some of our board reports have 50 data sources from multiple divisions. So that's the type of very high complexity that you deal with. So this is really around adoption of a holistic approach. I see a lot of us focusing a lot on the toys and tools, and that's great because it's exciting. But I think even more important is on the people side, right? Many would argue, if I put these tools in, will people lose their jobs? I think this is the most common question. And I always tell senior management, you have an opportunity to do one of two things, right? You can take costs out and bank the savings, but if you reinvest those savings and upskill your people to get more financial value out, isn't that a better approach than just going, I want to reduce headcount? And the way you go about doing that is you really got to take away that fear, right? I often want to have analytic learnings where any accountant, any FP&A manager, or any FP&A analyst or financial accountant can actually present how they've helped the business either drive cost savings or revenue uplift, right? And make sure that those are visible to senior execs. So if you're a general manager or higher, I mean, the pitch to them is really to keep your staff engaged and motivated. You've got to walk the floor. Nothing like joining in the user group once a month. I call it the beer drinking session. You can call it whatever you want, where senior leaders and do see presentations from the business. And I think this is really critical to be able to walk the floor. Also, I do know that in a lot of organizations, they're still having challenges around that agile mindset where they want to have that perfect requirement and then they go and build it in IT. So these tools basically allow business people like us, finance people like us, to do a lot of the iteration ourselves. So it actually reduces the reliance on IT, which then becomes a bottleneck. Any questions around?
Yeah, I've got one.
Yep.
Just on that whole people development part, and
sure.
You've talked a bit about the tools, but I guess if you look at it through the lens of trying to develop people's ability to interpret the data, which is sort of like, I guess, the value add part of all this at the end of the day. And do you see any particular basic skills or capabilities we need to actually invest in people to bring them up in that space? Is it like, well, we're all going back to stats learning again? Or
Yeah, so you're talking about data literacy. how to teach them how to use the data and understand the data and what it means.
Data and actually get value from it.
Yeah, so I think it's really important, right? A lot of us accountants, we look at financial numbers all the time, so relatively literate, right? But on the data side, we may not be as literate. I always try and pair up a quant. It could be an actuary, data science if you want to get an actuary in the room, or even a statistician, an undergraduate statistician, because I do find that when you pair people up, you get a better result. So that's how I normally do it. Does that answer your question? Or?
I did read that into your dot point through, which I think is important, that sort of bringing different people from diverse backgrounds.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at trying to upskill an entire group of people,
Yep.
I guess it's also an element of trying to think beyond training and skills.
Yep.
We actually need to invest in.
Yeah, look, I think there are courses in that, and I do cover that. There's a Stanford course you can do in statistical learning. It's a little bit heavy on, just a warning. But like I said, the first step I would do is use the Udacity course. It's a very cheap course. It gives you introduction to statistics, and it actually gives you real life examples. So it's not all dry material, right? These are actually taken from real life customers where they saw them doing spatial or predictive or data science work. And I think one thing I've learned is these tools that are pretty advanced, but also it's an opportunity for all of us to actually grow. So I actually went for Alteryx training in the US, and the person who trained me was the chief data scientist, who was a professor. So I walked in training, I thought, oh man, I'm not gonna get this, I'm gonna get killed. But what I found was the people who master the subject are able to dumb it down and teach you a concept, right? Always absorb the concept before you absorb the code. What I see in Australia is the reverse. They bamboozle you all these big terms, and then you go, what are you talking about? So I really suggest you can offer this course to your team. It's cheap enough. I think it's 100 US a month per user or something. And it's really some of the best instructors around the world that will instruct you. So the second of which is also process, right? So I know a lot of you guys work in government. There's a lot of legacy processes sitting in your business, which actually cause pain for the customers. You might have to even modify some of the processes to collect data for analytics. Personally for me, within one of the financial services companies I used to work for, I wanted pricing data, but we didn't actually have it. So we modified the call center process to collect the pricing data so we could run a predictive churn model on it. So this is the example where you have to work with the business, not just sit there and try and crunch a model and fit it, right? You have to always interact. And if the business doesn't have the data, think of how you can operationalize it with them.